How much is your cash value actually growing by each year in your whole life insurance policy? This is an extremely important question. A lot of times people have this question or they ask it after they've already started a policy. Now you would think that the answer is pretty straightforward. I earned X amount of dollars on my cash value last year, or the actual growth rate was 4% last year, whatever it was. The thing is, when you have a whole life insurance policy, when you try to get that actual growth rate, call it rate of return, in the industry, we'll hear the terminology internal rate of return a lot, like how much did it grow by? That's very difficult to get from a life insurance agent or from the individual who actually sold you the life insurance policy. And there's a number of reasons why, but the biggest reason why, in my opinion, is often people are attracted to whole life insurance policies based on things like this. Did you know you have a guaranteed floor? Let's call it a guaranteed rate of 3% on a whole life insurance policy. And on top of that, the insurance company pays dividends. The total dividend rate right now with this life insurance company is 6%. So when I say that, the total dividend rate with this life insurance company for your whole life insurance policy is 6%, what do you think that you are earning on your money? A lot of times people think 6% here. You mean to tell me I'm going to earn 6% on my money in a cash value life insurance policy? We don't earn 6%. But when we look at life insurance, if we direct our attention to the board, we see up top a dividend rate of 6%. So often one is told, or they take out a life insurance policy with a company that's paying a 6% dividend, maybe it's a 5% dividend rate, doesn't really matter here. But when you see this, a dividend rate of 6%, is that what you are actually earning each year? Or I should rephrase, is that what you think you are earning each year? A lot of people often do think this, or at least they're led to believe this before starting a whole life insurance policy. The short answer is no. We are not earning 6% on our cash value. And the reason why is anytime we see a dividend interest rate with a whole life insurance policy, I want to emphasize this point. This is a gross rate that is always credited after the cost of insurance, after the mortality charges, everything that comes with the life insurance policy. So if I'm simply trying to find out what is my cash value actually growing by, and I'm working with an agent already, what you want to ask your life insurance agent for is the internal rate of return. The internal rate of return is on most life insurance carrier software, meaning your agent has the ability to click a button and then generate a report that will display or disclose the internal rate of return. Now, it's important to make the distinction between the annual internal rate of return and the average internal rate of return. We'll get into that as we progress through this. But if you want to see what the net growth rate is and you want that information from your agent, requesting the internal rate of return, that'll be something that's very easy for them to do because they can click a button in the insurance company software, which will generate that report. You can also calculate it yourself. For example, if you've got $100,000 in cash value and it grew by $5,000, that's an indicator that it grew by how much? 5%. And if you're good at Excel, you may have done that already. But main thing here, dividend rate is a gross rate. What is the actual rate? Well, what you will see in every whole life insurance policy, even if it is designed with minimum insurance expenses and maximum cash value, is that the early years are negative. In any and all of our videos that you've seen, with the exception of the bank-owned life insurance product, which is not a whole life insurance product, that's a different product exclusively available to banks, but all whole life insurance policies that you've seen in all of our videos, did we ever have a positive cash value in the first year? The answer is no. It was always negative right out of the gates. And the reason why is because policy design, premium dollars don't show up in cash value in the first year, takes time to get going. I can maximize the PUA rider. But when I do that, to set expectations properly, the net growth rate, this net IRR, which you'll see will stand for internal rate of return, will likely fall somewhere between 3 to 5%. Now, if you've seen any of our videos that go through historical performance, historically, Some policies have done better than that. Between that 4 to 6% range, the best looking policy we have, it's a historical illustration from Guardian that produced a net internal rate of return. The average internal rate of return, it was just about 7.1%. That policy was started in 1975. I'm not expecting that to occur anytime soon, in the near future that is, because that lived through a very high interest rate period. We're in a very low interest rate environment right now. 3 to 5%, in my opinion, with a properly designed policy with one of the major mutual companies is a great starting point to set expectations properly. Now, that 3 to 5%, do you recall the core benefits of a cash value life insurance policy, particularly around the cash value? 3 to 5% that is safe, 3 to 5% that is liquid, and 3 to 5% that is tax-free. The tax-free piece is appealing to a lot of people who are in higher tax brackets. And the reason why is the question always comes up, if I'm in a 30 or 40% tax bracket, what happens or what do I have to earn before tax to net out 4 to 5% after taxes are taken off the top? So just combining those core benefits, safe, liquid, and tax-free, that's where that becomes much more appealing to people. But again, just to set expectations properly, that's likely where it is going to fall. Properly designed policy with one of the major mutual companies where we've seen the consistent proof of performance, not just illustrations, which is critical in my opinion. So that's the net at the end of the day. We will look at that as we start to look at some examples. Let's go through internal rate of return first, because this is important. This is terminology used by the insurance industry to determine the growth rate of cash value life insurance policies. You can request the internal rate of return both on the cash value and on the death benefit. It is, in my opinion, beneficial to look both at the annual internal rate of return and the average internal rate of return. The annual internal rate of return will display how much your cash value grew by over a 1-year period. So a nice way to illustrate this is if we want to use the stock market, say the S&P 500, if I invested money in the beginning of 2019 to 2020, the stock market, the S&P specifically, grew by about 30%. So my annual return for that specific year would be about 30%. So when I discuss annual internal rate of return, I'm referring to the annual growth. What did it grow during that particular year? Now, as I progress on to the average internal rate of return, that's going to display how much your cash value grew by over a certain period of time. So going back to the stock market example, what did you average over the past 30 years? Well, I just let my money sit and grow in the S&P 500, and I averaged out 8%, Steve. That was my average return with my money in the stock market. So if I'm looking at the 30-year average, the average internal rate of return on my life insurance policy, I might average out, call it 4%. That's the average internal rate of return. And that average IRR will factor in the early years of your policy, which will be negative. And I'm going to pull up an example of that shortly. So let's take a look actually at examples before we progress on to looking at dollar amounts, which is my favorite thing to look at. But let's look at some IRR here because this is important. What we'll start with is a life insurance illustration, and we'll start with the basics. So we've got a Guardian illustration here, and we'll begin just by looking at the basic dividend. So this is a policy with an individual paying in $500,000 total, $100K per year for 5 years, 40-year-old male, preferred plus health rating. Let's take a look. Beautiful. So as we look at this, first off, let's check off the design of the policy. Where is the money going? He's paying in $100,000. So if this is you, this is Guardian, you've got a lot of flexibility, but what's your base premium? You'll see your premium up here, $9,090. Where we came up with that dollar figure is because Guardian will allow us to illustrate a maximum of 10x, whatever the base premium is, each year into PUA payments. with the exception of the first year where we can go up to 50x. But here we've got a policy where we are just maxing it out year in and year out. Total death benefit, $2,050,000. That's a combination of the whole life death benefit and also the term rider here. This is a 1-year term rider, which gradually decreases and then it is removed after 7 years. This is really how you build in flexibility to a guardian policy. Without that 1-year term rider, the maximum PUA payment you can make each year is 3 times the base premium. With an OYT, you can just plow funds into PUAs. That's how we illustrate 10x, and that's how people add that much money into a policy. So as we look at this, the dividend interest rate here is 5.65%. This is 2022, and that is Guardian's dividend interest rate. So when we look at that dividend rate, do you see your policy grow by 5.65% at all in this example? Well, that's a tough question to answer just by looking at these stereo instructions. But what we can tell here, I can kind of walk you through this. First year, we pay in $100,000. That $100,000 went into the policy. Cash value is just about 84% right out of the gates. I paid in 100, I've got 83,733. I took a hit there. It's just about 16%, $16,000, a little bit more, is what I lost in the first year. Reason why is because the company is overcharging for the base premium up front. I've got the cost of the 1-year term insurance rider here, and then in addition to that, I've got PUA fees that are associated with the product as well. These are the net values right here, though, the net cash value. Year 2, he pays in $100,000. Cash value was 83.7. Now it's 182,283. Did you get your full $100,000 back? Almost, but no, not the full amount. Year 3, you paid in $100K again. Cash value was 182. Now it's 283 and change. I got my 100K back plus a little bit more on top of it, getting better and better each year. By year 5, I've paid in $500,000. And I have $500,000. And this is just the basic dividend illustration. Did you earn 5.65% on any of the first 5 years while you are paying into the policy? No, you did not. How about after that, though? So the next year, you pay in 0. Cash value grows from 502 to 524. Is that 5.65%? It's not. It's not even close. We're going to actually pull up the exact rate of return here, internal rate of return and the dollar amount. But let's first progress on or just scroll down a little bit. And here we go. So this is an illustration displaying just the dividend values, meaning the dividend rate of 5.65% is applied over time. We are going to look at the guaranteed rate and then also Guardian's indexed feature, all the same product, but different assumptions ran with the same policy. Before I do that, something very, very important here I'd like to hit on. What was the dividend interest rate? 5.65%. If you Google search Guardian's 2022 dividend interest rate, you will see 5.65%. What do you think this column represents? End of year dividend. I would think that it represents the dividend rate with the whole life insurance product. However, it does not. I wish this column would read end of year surplus. And this is not just a Guardian thing. All life insurance companies do this. But anytime we see a dividend column on a life insurance illustration, the guaranteed rate is excluded from this. It's not included. And an easy way to tell is look at year 10. We don't pay anything into the policy. We've eliminated the premium through a reduced paid up option, so there's no premium due. I can't pay anything in. Look at my dividend column. The dividend here is $13,335. Yet, when we look at our cash value, what do we see here? It grew from $600,000 to $629, which is more than $13,335. So what's going on here is this particular product has a guaranteed rate of 3%, which means the surplus piece is, guess how much? 2.65. And the 3% piece and the surplus, everything's included in this column, but the guaranteed rate of 3% is not in the annual dividend column. And to make this even more complicated than it already is, both the surplus and the guaranteed rate are gross numbers, meaning I won't see a net 2.65 or a net 3%. I can't just punch it into a calculator. Again, I wish that I could. So I am leading into the internal rate of return, I promise here. I promise. So let's look at the different assumptions I just mentioned. What do we have here? Dividend, 5.65%. This is what we just looked at. And what do you notice? There's your year 5 break-even point. I've paid in 500. I have 502. Look on the left, guaranteed values. The guaranteed rate on this product is 3%. Do we see it earning 3% on any given year? If we were just to take the cash value, let's look at this. Year 10, you're at 519,450. What you can do, just take a calculator. It's be very simple. Take the year 10 value, 519,450, multiply it by 0.03, $15,000 in change. So my cash value was 519,450. If I just add this now, let's add that, 519,450, I would have 535,033, but I've got 532. It did not earn 3%, even though when I look at my product and I look at my contract, it says I get a guaranteed rate of 3%. Well, the reason why I don't get 3% is because that 3% is, again, a gross rate. It is not the net growth rate, not the net internal rate of return. So I've got the guaranteed values, which shows me worst case what my cash value will grow to over time. Breaking even based on the guarantees between 8 and 9, that's good. Dividend values, and then the indexed values, right, tying to the S&P 500. Let's look at the internal rate of return now. Finally, that we've covered all of the additional information. So what we have here on the left, let's start with the dividend because that's what we started with the illustration. So we'll start with the middle example here, isolating this. Year 1, you paid in $100,000. You've got 83,733. I don't care if that dividend's 565%. If I pay in 100 grand and I've got 83,733, my internal rate of return is this, negative 16.27%, because I took a loss on my payment. That's the hit. I am buying the life insurance policy. Granted, we minimized the insurance expenses by designing it correctly. Still, we're negative. Second year, I pay in 100. Remember where we said we got less than the 100K back in the second year? Well, because we took a loss on that specific year, the annual internal rate of return is still negative. Year 3, you paid in 100. You got more than your 100 back. That's why the annual internal rate of return is now positive. What you'll also notice is when we have things highlighted in yellow is when the average internal rate of return is no longer in the red. It'll be in the red if you have less money in the product than what you've paid in. Once we break even, we've got a positive average internal rate of return. So if we were to look at the guaranteed values over here, where it takes longer for us to break even, between years 8 and 9, look at your average internal rate of return. You're in the red for the first 8 years. That's absolute worst case scenario, but still, I want to see that up front. So it's dividend, nothing thereafter. Now what does your IRR peak at? Just about 4.8% for a 40-year-old individual, preferred plus. With this particular product, there's a couple small things we can do to slightly enhance it, but this is a solid option here. There's your average internal rate of return. As time passes, you will see that get better. Let's take a look here. Scroll down a bit. Peaks out at about 4.25%. And that assumes the dividend rate never changes. Will it change over time? Yes, it will. That's always happened. Then we've got the indexed rider. That looks better, but of course we are banking on the S&P 500 index. We're using the past 25 years of S&P history. That's what the illustration software does in this example. So it's not bad at all. It makes the numbers look better, but it is totally hypothetical. Everything is except for the guarantees. But the dividend, when we track actual performance, I do like to look at this as far as, okay, could the performance do this? Very close to it, just based on the dividend interest rate we're at right now in the low interest rate environment. And we've seen policies with the major mutuals deliver ones we're actually putting in place, in addition to much older policies that started before I got into the business, some before I was even born. So internal rate of return represents the net growth rate. What am I actually earning year over year? What's the net growth rate? If you're interested in it, that's the term I want to ask for. If you're working with us, you can ask for it. We'll provide it to you sometimes without even asking. This way you know what the net growth rate is, or the IRR. Let's continue on here. So IRR is always great to look at, but let's look at the dollar amount I received in growth. That's always more exciting, isn't it? Like, the rate's great, but when I see actually $5,000 paid to my policy, or paid to my account, if I'm tracking my bank account, if it's a basic bank account, hey, I got $5,000 in direct deposit or in interest. This is fantastic. Like, it's fun to look at the dollar amount. The rate's great, but the dollar amount, like, that's the actual money you have that you can access and use for whatever you'd like. So what's the actual dollar amount that you received in growth, if you're going to track that? Some questions here that I just want to walk through with you. If you paid $10,000 into a life insurance policy, and you have $8,500 in cash value in the first year, what was your growth? Negative $1,500. Very important to note that, because what some insurance companies will do on their ledgers is, if I have a case like this where I pay in $10,000 and I see $8,500 in the first year, you'll see a column on some illustrations that read annual cash value growth, or annual cash value increase, $8,500. If I paid in $10K and I've got $8,500, it's a $1,500 loss. I don't care how you slice it, I lost money there. Now, next part here, if my cash value is $100,000, let's assume you've built your cash value up to $100,000 and you pay in $0, the cash value then grows to $105, what's your actual growth? $5,000. That's the net cash value growth. Follow along with me here. If your cash value is $100,000 and you paid $10,000 into the policy, the next year your cash value is $115, what's your growth? Is it $15,000? No. The answer is right here, $5,000. The thing is, we always must account for the payments we make into a policy and exclude the out-of-pocket payments from the net cash value growth. A sales tactic we see here, and I've seen this in a variety of ways over the years, is if I've got $100,000 in cash value, someone will look at a policy and say, hey, you paid in $10,000, but now the cash value is $115,000, so you grew by $15,000 this year. It's like, no, I didn't. I paid in $10,000. I'm not counting the $10,000 I paid as part of the growth that I received. This is money I deposited into the policy. What's the net growth, the net dollar amount I received from the insurance company that they paid to my whole life insurance policy? That's the number I want. Let's demonstrate this. So, we last looked at the internal rate of return here. Now let's look at some actual dollar amounts. We'll have some fun with this. Exact same policy here. Instead of internal rates of return, we'll look at the annual cash value growth and then the total gain on the policy. So if we look at the middle example, which is our basic dividend, First year, $100,000 went in, and we took a $16,267 hit. If we were to go back to the internal rate of return spreadsheet, that would be a negative 16.27% hit. Nice thing about $100,000 is that it is a round number, so it's very, very easy to track. Second year, I paid in $100,000. Cash value was $83,700, grew to $182 and change. I took a hit of $1,450. Now, looking at the total cash value gain, what this represents is by the second year, I've paid in a total of $200,000, and I've got $182,283, which means if I cashed it out today in the second year, I would take a loss of $17,717. Ouch, that hurts. Now, the third year, I pay in $100,000 again. Okay, I'm starting to get a little bit more back. I gained $1,600. I cashed it out. There's my loss. Year 4, paid in $100. Now it's starting to pick up the pace. The actual growth that year in dollars was $6,500 and change. I'm $9,500 short. And then by year 5, I've paid in a total of $500. I gained a little under $12,000 that particular year. And then the total gain over 5 years is $2,200. Early years are the worst years with any whole life insurance policy, no matter how well it's designed. We've got a minimum premium here. We're maximizing the cash value. And I want to add something, just some additional information here, is if you're not comfortable with that upfront hit, that is okay. I would never like it, and I don't like it, when we see cases where someone likes the benefits of a cash value life insurance policy, particularly the long-term aspect, the tax-free benefit doesn't hurt. Okay, it's liquid, I can access the cash value, but they look at it and that upfront hit just does not do it for them. Like, I can't do it. Even though I can take that right now, I can't do it. Maybe we look at a higher cash value policy where instead of $16,000, that's only $8,000 negative in the first year because we can minimize that. Regardless, we can't take it. Just emotionally or from a dollar standpoint, we can't do it. That is okay. In my opinion, once we understand the product in and out, we've got full transparency and can make an informed decision, it is ultimately up to you. We're not going to pressure you in one way or the other. If we think it's not your best interest, I will definitely let you know that. Just, hey, I wouldn't do this if I'm in your same situation. Sometimes we have conversations with business owners who like the idea of using these products for their business because you can do a lot of good in a lot of ways there, but they're just starting their business. And just speaking from experience, the most challenging years for a lot of business owners are the early years, where I'll state to a business owner, if you start a policy, no matter how well it's designed, you are going to take a hit on your money. And the question I would ask myself if I'm you is this upfront hit of $16,000, could I have used that additional $16,000 for my business where every penny is extremely valuable to really get things going? And then look at really starting a nice policy a couple of years down the road, once I can cash flow no problem and it doesn't feel like a burden or doesn't stress me out. And granted, everyone's different, we're all in different positions, but that's the kind of stuff I do like to look at initially. But back to this, the cash value growth, there's the annual growth, which we replaced the annual internal rate of return column with, and then the total gain, which is pretty simple. I paid in $500,000. So if I look at year 20, I paid in $500. My cash value is $1 million here, and there's my gain of $500,000, 501 to be precise. If I look at the guarantees, was I guaranteed to grow? Yes. I have a $166,000 gain. What about the indexed rider? Some nice potential there. Will that actually happen? Who knows? I can't tell you because I don't know. But here I see the actual cash value growth and the total gain over time. Let's progress on. We're going to look at some examples here. So, hey guys, Steve Parisi here. If you enjoyed the content you just saw, Please subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you'd like more information or to see some custom policies for yourself, feel free to call or email our offices at the contact information below.